I think perhaps the most obvious sign about the slow plodding downfall of Marvel Studios is that in the creator space that we're in here, videos talking about Marvel used to garner hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views from huge creators. And some of those creators still do big numbers. But in general, whether it's talking about comic books or talking about Marvel and DC, unless you're segregated off into like that being your niche, that's your one thing that you talk about. When we get into it, the videos just don't do as well as they once did. And I think that that's indicative of a larger malaise that people feel for the brand. And we're going to talk about this here because there's an article from Slash Film talking about basically 2025 being the 2025 box office being the year that Marvel's fall from grace really is proven. If you want an example of what they mean, they kind of cite that 2022 was the last real year of Marvel dominance. In that year, you had Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, you had Wakanda Forever, and you had Thor Love and Thunder. I think they made like 955, 859, and like $760 million respectively for each of those films. All three of them ended up in the top 10 for the worldwide Hollywood box office. But this year, in the year of our Lord 2025, this is the first year since 2011 where no Marvel movies will end up in the top 10 at the box office, because just recently the massive opening for Zootopia, now granted that is a Disney franchise, so Disney wins either way, the massive opening for Zootopia pushed Fantastic Four First Steps out of the top 10, which means that this year only Superman from DC, Superman 2025, is the only superhero in the top 10 at the box office. So let's go through some of this article. I want to go look at this post also that was going viral about the MCU over on X. So we'll look at that, and we'll just kind of talk about whether Marvel actually has fallen from grace in the way that they're saying that it has. I do believe that this is true, but let's listen to what they have to say. For roughly a decade, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was the unquestioned king of all things at the box office, from the very beginning in 2008, when Iron Man became the unexpected smash hit, to the unbelievably high highs of the $2.79 billion success of Avengers Endgame. It was an incredible run. To date, the franchise has netted more than $32 billion in ticket sales globally. Unfortunately for Disney and Marvel Studios, those numbers have been climbing more slowly, in recent years. With the hits harder to come by, 2025 is now nothing if not evidence of the MCU's fall from grace. They mention here about Zootopia's massive $559 million opening, knocking out the 2025 Fantastic Four movie from the box office, and how Superman is now the only film that is there. It says, setting aside the 2020 ill-fated New Mutants movie, which made $49 million worldwide, which was the only Marvel movie released that year during the crippling COVID-19 pandemic, it's the first time since 2011 that we won't have a single movie from Marvel in the top 10. In 2011, they saw only Thor with $449 million and Captain America: The First Avenger with $379 million. They were in the release leading up to the Avengers in 2012, and of course from 2012 onwards it was breakneck pace. Avengers shattered all expectations with $1.51 billion. It was a game-changing success. From that point forward, it was like Kevin Feige and the brass at Marvel could do no wrong. In 2019, Disney became the first studio in history to make $10 billion at the box office. That was buoyed greatly by Avengers Endgame, which made $2.79 billion, Captain Marvel, which made $1.12 billion. Of course, we all know that that was because it was sandwiched between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, so people felt like they needed to go see it, which of course they really didn't need to. This is of course proven that it wasn't necessarily a success on its own with the failure of the Marvels in 2023. It says Black Widow made $379 million, but was hampered greatly by its streaming release. Yes, they were very stupid to release that day and date on Disney+. When Spider-Man No Way Home made a genuinely astounding $1.9 billion later that year, it felt like the MCU was truly back. I don't think it ever felt that way. to anyone. I really don't. I think a lot of people saw Endgame as the natural conclusion to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. From that point forward, everything that was successful felt like it was an event film with team-ups. Now, that's not necessarily only true. Like they said, when we talk about the success of those movies like... when we talk about successes of movies like... Multiverse of Madness. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought there. Multiverse of Madness or Wakanda Forever, both of those, even those, technically, Doctor Strange brought in Black Widow, so she was a major part of that. It feels a bit like a team-up, even though she didn't have her own singular film, but most of them felt like they were a success. And I think their best formula was when they stopped relying on the individual character in the title role himself and brought in more characters. For instance, when they did Thor... when they did Thor Ragnarok, was it Ragnarok or was it Love and Thunder where they brought in Hulk? I think that was Ragnarok. That seemed to be the panel for success there. Doctor Strange, already successful, brings in Wanda Maximoff. It gets even more successful. Of course, you've got Sam Raimi directing it. It was a different vibe for most Marvel movies. Wakanda Forever was successful, though not as successful as the first film. So they were, and then you go and you realize what the real problem was. At least this is my summation of it. Says things even looked promising in 2021 when Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings made $432 million when very few movies were making any money. Look, of all of the Phase 4 movies, I think Shang-Chi was the best, by far. But I think Eternals was the first sign that we could prove for people that the problem here was that Marvel's success from 2012 to 2019, where it felt like they could do no wrong. Yes, there were ones that were less successful compared to other films in the franchise. What it made people believe is that the character didn't matter, that they could get any character over. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is probably the best proof of that, right? Which is that to the mainstream normie, Guardians of the Galaxy, that franchise wasn't something that they had probably ever heard of, but was massively successful for Marvel. But again, this was during the wave of Marvel between 2012 and 2019 when they were riding high on the success of the Avengers films. When you move on from there and you get past Endgame, you start to realize that these characters that nobody has heard of, they don't carry weight. They hold no water for the general public. You need a big name to carry them, and it just didn't work. Shang-Chi made a decent amount of money, but again, $432 million is not a lot when you look at the billion-dollar franchises that they were running before that. Eternals, another franchise where I think a lot of what people believed was that Marvel was going to be able to just force these characters into the public zeitgeist, and people were just going to accept them and go and see sequel after sequel after sequel for these films, but they disappeared after that. And it's not just Marvel's fault per se. I think what the trends are bearing out now, at least my opinion on the matter, is what we're learning, guys, is that what works now are video game movies or movies that are based off video game characters, like, say, a Minecraft movie, which did really, really well this past year. Obviously, you'll have failures like Borderlands, but I think in general video game movies are trending upwards as far as popularity, especially as they get more, they don't have as many misses with each consecutive release. The more successful video game releases they do, it's working on television as well. Think of the success of a show like Fallout right now, and again, we'll forget the failure of the Halo series. Horror movies are always something that they can rely on, mainly because of their lower budgets. They don't have to spend as much money to make them. Much higher return on investment for most of those films, and they have a built-in dedicated audience that will always show up for those franchises. Look at how popular Final Destination still is in 2025, despite the fact that the franchise has been around, I believe, since the late 90s. Animated sequels, mainly for millennials to bring their kids to, and I believe the same thing is true for the live-action remake of animated movies. They're kind of designed to bring millennial audiences in that will bring their kids in to go see it. That used to be the demographic expectation for perhaps millennials with superhero movies, right? Your husband will take you and the kids to go see them because he loved Captain America growing up, because he loved Batman growing up. Batman, in fact, doesn't even count. He transcends all of that in a lot of ways. But it's not just the superhero genre that's dying. I have my own favorite genres in Hollywood. I love spy movies. I love action movies. movies. And when you think about it, this year, there was like 3 movies that I thought were going to be a lot more, like, that I was going to care about a lot more, and they ended up not really being much of anything. Think of like Black Bag, or The Amateur with Rami Malek, or The Accountant 2, which I have finally eventually got around to watching on a plane like 8 months after it came out, and I actually kind of enjoyed it. But there isn't the interest there the way there used to be. The only thing that seems to work these days, like other than those other genres that I mentioned before, is the likes of like less frequent blockbusters, like a Jurassic World franchise, which again didn't make as much money as it did in the Chris Pratt era, but the Scarlett Johansson led Jurassic World Rebirth that came out this year still did very good numbers at the box office. You can look at the top 10 for the movies this year. Lilo and Stitch, that's again falls right into what I was talking about earlier. A Minecraft movie, right, what I was talking about earlier. Jurassic World Rebirth. Demon Slayer is another example. I think anime and manga are also genres which have been unbelievably popular here in America, just not necessarily on the big screen, but they're making inroads there as well. Then you get How to Train Your Dragon. Falls right into what I was talking about there. Mission Impossible is an example of that not working, because despite the fact that it made, what was it, $598 million, so almost $600 million at the box office. It cost like almost that much to make, and that's infrequent, but not as infrequent as it used to be, because there used to be larger gaps in the middle of those Mission Impossible movies. Perhaps if they drew them out longer and didn't release them as frequently, it might feel more like appointment viewing for people. That wouldn't really work for the last one because it was a sequel to the prior film, but less frequent blockbusters works. But Avengers Doomsday now is coming up, and while we're talking about the failure of the MCU currently, which is what we're talking about here, they bring up Guardians of the Galaxy, they bring up Deadpool and Wolverine's $1.3 billion success last year. Again, pretty much lost money after the recent reveal of how much that movie cost to make. But again, team-up movie. It's not just Deadpool. It's Deadpool and Wolverine, and he doesn't have the stink of the MCU because he was a Fox character before he became an MCU character, so people don't have the same, it doesn't have the same baggage attached to it. You don't need to rely on the MCU name to sell a Deadpool movie. A Deadpool movie sells itself. You bring in, I almost said Henry Cavill, you bring in Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and you have a license to print money in many ways. So then we get what people are talking about now. With Avengers Doomsday coming up, they had this post that went viral the other day where they were looking at the cast list here, and there are almost no women mentioned. We've got Rebecca Romijn, of course, Mystique. We've got Yelena. We've got Florence Pugh. They mention Vanessa Kirby. They mention Letitia Wright, and they mention Hannah John Kamen. But in general, it heavily favors male actors, which tells a lot of people that what they're trying to do is go back to what worked in the first 3 phases of the Marvel movies, which was tell the stories of popular male characters. The problem is they won't have any time to tell any stories, because when you have a cast list that enormous, how are you even going to tell a coherent story from the end of this movie, from the beginning of this movie to the end, when you have to fit in this many different characters all the way throughout? Not to mention the fact that they talked about the idea that when they went into production, they did not have a finished script. That is a bad sign for anyone involved. And now people were saying, like, look, can we get the MCU back? And then people are crapping on them because they're saying, no, every MCU movie production flopped. It was because the MCU was a disaster, both critically and commercially. They replaced it with the MHEU. And you know what? I had this tweet the other day. Let me actually pull this up here. So I was thinking about Marvel Decline. That didn't take as long to find as I thought it would. I was thinking about Marvel Decline. I said Marvel Decline has been talked about endlessly. Interestingly, when you average the scores for movies pre and post Avengers Endgame, critic scores have dropped, but audience scores have actually gone up. There is a reason for that. You have hollowed out your audience. You are now down to a core audience of MCU diehards who will show up to any movie and just take in the slop that they give you and say, thank you, sir, I'd like some more. The critic scores pre-Endgame averaged out to about 85%. The critic scores post-Endgame hit at about 71%. And then audience scores pre-Endgame, 85%. 89%, but then actually went up post Avengers Endgame to 89%, meaning that the people are far, far fewer than were going before, but they're just gonna love whatever they give you. But I ask you, look, they had an inflated sense of importance with irrelevant characters like the Eternals. They're going back to these main characters that everybody knows. Is it too late? I believe that it is. You are going to always have these characters that work. Spider-Man is always going to sell. Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to make $1 billion. I don't have a doubt in that. There's not a doubt in my mind that it'll make $1 billion. The Spider-Verse movie, whenever they get around to finishing that one, I have no doubt that that movie will do very, very well as well. But when you think about the movies that flopped when they course corrected and went back to men, think about all of those movies, whether it's Shang-Chi, whether it's this year's. People were arguing about the box office of Fantastic Four, and when you're arguing about the $600 million box office, it just isn't what it used to be. This was happening over at DC as people argued endlessly about whether the $600-something million that Superman made meant that it was actually a hit. If you have to ask, it isn't. If you have to ask, it isn't. You know it when it's a hit. It enters the cultural discussion in a way that cannot be manufactured. They're trying to do that now with Predator Badlands by hyping up its opening box office while ignoring the fact that the inflated ticket prices mean that it was always going to be as successful or more successful than the 1987 Predator movie, despite the fact that Predator opened to like 1,600 screens or 1,300 screens or something like that, and Badlands opened to like 3,700 screens. They are trying to manufacture an inflated sense of relevance, but you know relevance when you see it. They cannot lie to you about this. They are gaslighting you, bro. It's like I keep saying these days. Feels like they're gaslighting you constantly. I do not believe that the MCU will reach those same levels. You will get the successful films. Avengers will probably make a crap ton of money. Will it make $1 billion? Yeah, maybe it will. Probably. I don't know. But will that have any bearing on the films that come after that? No, I do not believe so. Spider-Man will make money. If they throw a couple in there that actually end up being good, they might do pretty well. But there isn't going to be this gravy train that once existed with Marvel franchises. It's on to a new genre for the general public. Personally, I would love to see a resurgence in the thrillers of like the 90s and early 2000s. I want to see more movies a la the era of like a Ridley Scott film, or I'm sorry, a Tony Scott film, stuff like that. Those are just my thoughts in the matter. Let me know down below, guys. Are they kind of? I didn't go through the article as much. I had more than I wanted to say. I just wanted to use the numbers as like a box office inroad to the discussion. But let me know down below, guys. Do you think Marvel has a way to claw itself back to relevance, or is the ship on its way down and there's nothing they can do about it? I would be interested to know. If you don't know what our podcast is, guys, Pop Culture Crisis is live Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is of course noon Pacific. Thanks for listening, guys. See you there. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.